I thought I might rework my Osage flight bow. It had lost a tip when I last used it because I managed to stick the arrow into the belly there and it exploded. So I'm reluctant to, there's the other tip, reluctant to use it at full power, but it was about £80, so if I get it on the tiller and I re-tiller it to 50 and maybe even build out a support coming here so I can draw a shorter arrow and it won't comply to any specific flight bow category, but it'll just be interesting to see how far I can shoot an arrow from a £50 bow. Hopefully I can still keep it, say 27 maximum length flight arrow, or maybe 26. I mean, shorter arrows are more aerodynamic. I'll pop it on the tiller and we can have a look. It was the right pig to brace it, and it's not been shot for a long time, so I'm going to exercise it gently because previously I've had a Osage bow that had been sitting for a long time. I went to check its draw weight and it exploded on me, so I'll give it some exercise, bearing in mind it was probably about £80 when it was used in anger, so we'll just give it some gentle exercise, see what it looks like it's doing. Now it doesn't really rock on the tiller because the grip is shaped and it sort of sits on that saddle rather nicely. So it's £40. And it'd be a shame if it went bang because it's the bow that shot an arrow furthest for me. Right limb looks a little stiffer than the left, do you think? It's 45. There, I touched 50. So I think that was 50 at about 22, which means if I'm aiming for 50, I can lose a bit of draw weight. Now, if I remember rightly, I think the belly was heat treated, so it may need heat treating again after I've removed wood off the belly. Obviously I'll have to mask off the tips so the heat doesn't degrade the glue and pop the tips off. But that's looking like something I can play with, because I'm not going to be able to shoot it at its £80 draw weight anymore, especially short draw, because the jar on this elbow is just horrible. I did something to this elbow. I was testing a trigger release with a fairly heavy bow and I wasn't ready for it to go. I was trying to feel the pressure on the trigger release and it went and that elbow snapped back, and it's not been right since. I mean, as soon as I do any work with a rasp or anything, it flares up. But £50 I can manage, and I should be able to lock out the elbow and put some strapping on it. Perhaps some plywood, build up a plywood former and fill it full of concrete, something like that, you know, stabilise the elbow. Watch this space. I suppose I should document the bow before I fiddle arse about with it, because if I do heat treat it again, I might try and pull out a hint of this deflex. Although my theory is that you want the reflex and deflex to cancel out and end up being sort of dead straight from tip to tip to the grip, or the back or the belly, I'm not sure which. Anyway, if I measure it now, I'll know what it is for later. So we're a whisker over an inch. About 27 millimetres. I put masking tape on the back of the bow with distances measured from the nock, and I measured the thickness every 3 inches, which I documented there just as a reference. You can see the odd little bit where there the thickness has increased and then gone down again, which is worth noting. And then I started rasping the belly, and you can see the colour change from the nicely aged Osage to the freshly worked. And you can see I haven't taken off a lot of wood, but I thought we'll go slow and steady. You can see that's one area it had been heat treated. Might have been heat treated along the whole lot, I'm not certain. But we can only do what we can do and see how it progresses. I checked it on the tiller and it had only given me about 1 more inch of draw length. So I've had another go on the belly, taking about the same again. I'm not taking much off the tips because I'm trying to keep them stiffish, and I might narrow them a whisker. And they've been heat treated there, so I don't want to risk taking the heat treating out and them suddenly bending and going weak. I'll pop that on the tiller again, but I won't bother showing it on the tiller until I've got a little bit more draw length out of it. I mean, I had a right old game of marbles. My digital scale seemed to read alright, but the analogue one seemed to move again, so I stripped it down, sorted out the zeroing, and I checked it with a 10 kilogram weight, which I'd had spot calibrated 10.6 kilograms by taking it to the local post office. Anyhow, all seems to be well now. Just got to put the clear glass back on the front of that. It's just the analogue one's much easier to read, but when the last bow smashed, that fell to the floor and it just knocked it out of kilter, so I had to fiddle around with it a bit. Anyhow, back to the plot. I've reconsidered it a bit, and I think going from £80 to 50 is just too much. I'll be removing too much from the belly. I may be taking off heat treatment, and if I take off less, if I go to 60, I can always take off more later and go back to 50 if I want. So I'm going to take it a bit further. I'll put it to 60, see how it's looking, and I can manage £60, especially off the finger rather than a release aid. So I think I'll be alright at that. So let's have a shufty, and I'll try and keep my head out the way this time. Right, down we go. So I better give it some exercise. Where's our 50? That's working pretty hard. 55, 24, what's that? Oof! Blimey. So I think that was 60 at about, I can't remember what I said, 24, 25. I can review it on the video, but it means we are pretty close now. And it looks like 60 is easily manageable, but I want to review the tiller. Are the tips uncurling? Do I want them to uncurl? Do I want light, narrow, stiff tips? You know, it's all very touchy-feely with a flight bow, but I think going to £60, I should easily get 300 yards. Well, no, the best this had done was, I think, 341. So, yeah, I should get over 300. We'll see.